when podcasting, especially when starting out here, we want to be focusing on a couple of different things. Obviously, you're having to juggle your gear, what you're going to talk about, and then who you're going to have on, and how you're going to record it, and how you're going to edit it. There's all these considerations. One of the main ones that we do get bogged down in is the gear side of things, what microphone I need, all that kind of stuff. But I'm here to tell you in this episode that we want to focus more on the quality of content as opposed to the quality of our audio when starting out. But I'll explain that. Let's roll the titles. Brand My Podcast. This is a show for podcasters to start your podcast with confidence and elevate your voice to give your listeners a brand they can connect with. Brand My Podcast. G'day and welcome to the next episode of Brand My Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Frank. It's episode 8, and this one is for those of you that are getting bogged down in the details of your gear, especially worrying about what the quality sounds like. Sure, you might not have the best stuff out there just yet, and you can always iterate over time with the way that you both process your audio, record your audio, and the mic you use or the camera you use, whatever it might be. If that's what's stressing you out, I'm here to tell you that that shouldn't be your focus necessarily. You know, if that's your jam and this is what you really are into, by all means, or if it's a podcast about audio equipment and for audiophiles, then sure, that is something I can understand. But for the most part, and for most of us starting out with podcasting, we want to ensure that the quality of our content is greater than what the quality of our audio is. If they can be both, as great as each other, fantastic. That's the ideal end result there. But what's most important is the quality of our content to begin with. And when I thought of this topic, that I felt needed to be covered here because I myself got bogged down in that kind of stuff when I first started podcasting. And it was, thinking back to that kind of saying, quality over quantity, which is kind of applicable, I guess, in this respect, where you don't want to just pump out episodes after episodes, just to have more numbers. But the quality of that content that you have needs to draw in a listener, to keep them coming back for more, and advocating for your podcast, telling others about that episode that they've just listened to. So when we're thinking about quality over quantity, or in this case, content quality over audio quality, we need to shift our priorities in the right space, especially when starting out, because this is the biggest point, is that you can always iterate over time. But what I want to do before we move on is focus on what is quality content. And to break it down there, what we want to focus on is 5 different kind of things here. The first is content that is relevant to your podcast. We don't want to have random bits and pieces here and there, unless your podcast is quite general in its nature of what it is you talk about. What we also want to have is a podcast that gives our listeners a solid takeaway that they can, feel like that time that they invested in listening to your podcast, be it just yourself or with a guest, was of value to them. Which, if you do that, the next tip is having content that hooks them in and keeps them there to listen to the whole episode. The amazing thing about podcasts is it generally does, and it brings back people even if they haven't finished a whole episode. They might, listen to it in 2 halves. They drop the kids off at school and they come back to it and then listen to it again. The other kind of way of content being of quality and of value is content that connects. If it's a story, especially, like storytelling is something that inherently humans are looking for and engage with. And if that is a connection point with your audience, there might be that one listener out there that it's experienced what you've experienced or what your guest has experienced. The other side of the coin of connection is building that rapport with you or your guests. So if you're giving your listeners something to connect with, giving some insight into who you are or who your guests are, and being maybe a little bit vulnerable depending on what the subject matter is, or letting your personality shine in that respect to give people an understanding of who they're buying into here, who they want to advocate for, who they want to love and trust and listen to and get that value from. And if you're doing all of that, we need to be doing that consistently. So if you're showing up consistently, be it a daily or weekly, and every second week or a monthly podcast, if your listeners know when to find you and when you're going to be showing up with that quality content, that in itself is providing some quality there. You are showing up consistently. So there are 5 general tips. They're broadly applicable depending on what type of podcast you have, be it interviews, be it solo, educational type of content like this kind of podcast is, news and affairs, whatever it might be. We want to show up with something that people find value in time and time again, and it might not take long to get that listenership, or it might take a very long time to have people see what you're delivering. It might take years. It might take a couple of years to get to the following that you are looking for or hoping to achieve, those active listeners to keep coming back for more. And that needs to be a reality check for a lot of us. But if we're doing what we do best and what we can only do best is offer quality content, then that's what we need to be doing. If this is what you're invested in, this is what you're interested in doing, you want to give this value away to your listeners, we need to keep showing up. We need to keep offering something that they can connect with, that they have something to take away with, that they find is relevant to what they have come here for in the first place. So I hope that makes sense. But in terms of the whole quality of audio and quality of content, this is something that you can build up over time. Both with your gear, you can iterate, you can change mics, you can change your whole setup and everything to make it sound better. And look, I'm a big advocate for doing so, but there is a time and a place to do that as well. And it's exactly the same with your content. No one, I don't think, from the get-go is expecting you to have the most amazing, golden nuggets possible in your first few episodes, especially if you're new to this. And especially if you are yet to really build a foundational brand around you or your business that this podcast is related to. So if you're just starting out and a podcast is that first kind of you're dipping your toe into the water moment, along with your Instagram and TikTok and an email list and your website and LinkedIn, all these different touch points. If you're new to all these things, then your quality of content most likely is going to get better with time. Kind of like a fine wine, you might say. You'll find out what works, what people respond to more, and you will also have the opportunity to ask questions of your listeners, of your audience, to find out what they want to hear, to get that feedback over time, to create better quality audio. So the point here is that people will forgive you for not hitting the mark there with the greatest of audio. Let's say if you're just recording on your phone, people will forgive you if you're just using your phone and some earphones with it to record those first few foundational kind of episodes. That's okay. What most matters in that case is that you are delivering at least something of value to your listeners so that they want to come back for the next episode and the next episode, because that is when the podcast gear becomes relevant. If you're dropping bombs, you have all this knowledge in your head that you just want to share, or you want to share your experiences, or you want to share what your general interests are with someone else that has that same, interest, then share that excitement, share that energy, share that interest, knowledge, all those things from the get-go as best you can, and as best you can articulate in your own words as well. Because that's another aspect of quality, is the quality of your voice. No one's expecting you to have a broadcaster, TV presenter voice from the get-go if you've never stepped up to a mic before. But I hazard a guess that again, in 10, 20, 50, maybe even 100 episodes, it's okay that your voice and your quality of your voice and how you intonate and how you converse with others will become far, far better with that practice. So that quality is not expected to be there from the beginning. People will forgive you for it, and you'll get better with time, and that's okay. And I guess just to reiterate that, if you are starting out, you do have the luxury of, I guess, a smaller following. And I'm not trying to put, I'm not trying to polish a turd or anything like that. It's more a case of, if you are starting out in this space, you do have the luxury of not having that following, and you have that opportunity to get things right. By just starting, at least you're doing something. But in your heart, I would imagine that it's a long-term play. You will only get better, and you'll get better guests, and you'll get better gear, and you'll get better the way you converse and speak off the cuff or from a teleprompter. Whatever is your process, it will get better. But you have that luxury if you are starting out. So if that's you and you have 100 followers on your social media platforms, that's okay. Still start a podcast. Share what you know, what you're interested in, because you have the luxury of not having that added weight on your own, shoulders that you impose yourself in your own head that makes you feel like, this needs to be bigger than Ben-Hur when you first start out. Now, on the other side, if you do have a big following, then you don't quite have as much luxury there to get it right the first time. You are expected to have all those knowledge bombs that you might already put out in other platforms. However, you have the quality of content to begin with, so that should be the priority of getting that done first. If you can afford better gear, if you can afford someone else to shoot it for you, record it for you, edit it for you, great. You've got the advantage right there. But you don't have the luxury in that respect to make mistakes, and it's a little bit harder to be, a podcast that doesn't start out all that, professionally, but still, people and your audience, especially those followers who follow you from your Instagram, from your TikTok, from your LinkedIn, from your email list to your podcast, will still appreciate that authenticity if you show up authentically. And you say, look, you level with people and say, look, I'm new to this. I'm still figuring my shit out here. And I want to use this as a platform to connect with you in a different way. If you're not already connecting with them through video or audio, this is that chance to hear your voice, hear your tone, hear that emotion, that excitement, that interest. That's your opportunity to level with your audience and to use this as a more, vulnerable way of expressing who you are, and people tap into that brand that you have. Maybe see a different side of you that they might not have gotten from some carousels you might have made on Instagram, or a reel or a TikTok video of you dancing and pointing and do all that fun stuff. So this is that platform for you to recognize that still, in that case, no matter whether you're starting a brand or you're very well known with your brand, focus still on that quality of your content, because that's what people are coming to you for. But look, I'm no dummy to this. If audio equipment is of interest to you and is of value to you, and maybe gives you that bit of confidence to get in front of a mic, to hit record, to talk and speak your truth and what you know and what you want to share and upload that, then all the power to you. Go out to your local store that sells this kind of gear. Like here in Australia, JB Hi-Fi. Right there, you can pick up the same mic that I had for between $100 to $200. If you have that budget to work with and that does the job for you, please, I really encourage you to do that. Because if that's going to give you the confidence, then fantastic. That's what you need to do, because that's what is going to work for you. If you are comfortable and you're not too worried about using your phone and keeping it nice and dirty and edgy, but you have, something to deliver, go with that. Don't feel pressured to pick up a mic and make it a little bit more complicated for what you want it to be. So that's my tip there, is really to invest in this kind of gear, the quality of your audio, when you are ready. Once you've got your content sorted, you've scheduled out things, you've planned, strategized, you've got your purpose in place, you've got your cover art, you've got all these kind of little things and pieces that you need to have when starting a podcast. If you've got all that sorted and you're happy and confident with it to put it out there, then buy a mic. Then buy a fancy camera if you want to record video. Then hire an editor to edit your podcast for you. Create, a content creator. All these elements that go with it. Nail down the real core part of what's going to make this podcast of yours successful first. But I'm sure you've thought of this. I may be preaching to the converted, but just in case, if you're considering and you're Googling at the moment, what podcast mic should I buy? Or Frank, what podcast mic should I buy? Buy any mic, doesn't really matter. What I'm going to tell you is focus on the quality of your content. That's it for the episode. I hope that was helpful, no matter where you are in your process of building your own brand, starting a podcast, or using this as an extension of your business. Until the next episode, I will see you then. Leave a like and review if you're listening on Apple Podcast. But until then, I will see you in the next episode. Bye.